Okay, we are recording. Craig, how are you today?
I'm great. How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Whereabouts are you today?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and we're getting a little snow here, which is we haven't had tons, so that's kind of exciting.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, look, let's kick your playlist off, and we always start with the same question. And I'm going to ask you, please, Craig, to tell me the track that you think has the greatest ever intro.
So I struggled with this one, but what I kept coming back in my mind was the introduction to Gangstar's song JFK to LAX. And it's great. I, actually, I think my mind kept going to Gangstar immediately. I think that they're in that sort of CD era of rap, of hip hop, when people really made a lot of tracks and skits were kind of um, popular, or they really had a lot of great entertaining intros. And I think even the way this record, that record, Above the Clouds, is that what, yeah, opens up is excellent. But this one's great. It's a voicemail where Guru says, or someone's saying, talking about Guru, the MC, getting caught with a gun at the airport, and then it kind of shifts to a courtroom drama. And it's all very ambitious and fun, and it leads to a song which is great and has a great hook. I connect JFK to LAX, but I think it really kind of sets the scene in a dramatic and cinematic way that I've always loved.
I think it's really interesting when artists come on and pick hip hop tracks because I think when you ask that question, like the greatest ever intro, people always seem to lean towards of the 600 shows I've done, people lean towards more guitar based music, which I find ridiculous when you think about it because even without skits, like the intros to so many hip hop records are so instantaneous and so impactful, yet people never lean into that. And I think around the time that the Gangstar were doing their thing, I guess even like a lot of the early Public Enemy singles had like huge voiceovers before the beat dropped, and the same with 3 Feet High and Rising. The skits on right the way throughout Dayla's 3 Feet High and Rising, fantastic. And like no one ever. So you're the first person that's come on and chose to skip from a hip hop track.
Oh, well, that's great to know. Yeah, that whole record I think is chock full of them. They were I think that they were leaders in the genre of great, in between song and introductions, etc.
Um, Craig, when you come to making music, um, when you first started making music, the way that people would kind of get their music would have been far different from how it is now. We've seen the kind of evolutions of streaming services and such. And we're even seeing apps like TikTok being used by artists to get their music out there to new ears. Um, and I think a lot of the things with apps like that, they seem to be kind of catering to maybe shorter attention spans that work in a very fast paced
Right.
thumb swiping way. And I just wonder if any of these kind of changes in how people are getting their music and ever sort of filter through and affect your creative process, if at all.
That's a good question. I would say consciously very much not. I mean, maybe that means I'm stuck in my ways, but I very much, for instance, still think about albums. I write until, sort of an album has revealed itself to me and say like all these songs are hanging together by this kind of one thing, and that makes sense to me. And sometimes it reveals itself to you and it teaches you something about the songs you're
Sure.
writing. But yeah, I mean, I don't think um even, I think it's more like the holdover, um even like the way sequence a record, is because you always, like, oftentimes you want to have, it seems like, at the end of the first side you have a quieter song, and that's, I think, due to the way vinyl works. I mean, I think like the smaller groove, or the grooves on the inside, is better for a smaller song, and that's something I didn't even know. I just got used to hearing records kind of, and side of a record, then and then coming back with a big punch for side two. And so that's just something that's been ingrained in me, and I know that's due to the physical, um, the limitations of vinyl. But I think like I feel like for better or worse, I'm resistant to that kind of thing just because when I fell in love with music, it was, buying albums, buying vinyl records. And even though I do now listen to almost all my music when I'm mobile, like on headphones walking around New York.
Okay. Well, look, you've just lent on something there. You said when you first fell in love with music, so that's a lovely little seamless link into track two, where I'm gonna ask you, please, Craig, to tell me the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and again, this one was a little hard because I was thinking at first. I mean, I remember watching the Monkees television show and really loving it, but I wasn't able to settle on a song. So I thought about a song that like really moved me. And Star Wars, the movie, came out when I was in first grade, so six. Um, and it was, it kind of took over. Like, it was all me and my friends could talk about. And we used to go roller skating with a bunch, and there'd be so many kids at this roller skating rink. And I remember they had kind of a mix of Star Wars. That it was like they could play a record and it would kind of go through, it would do the intro, but it would even get to the cantina scene. It was kind of like a mega mix. And I, the thing I remember is that we all loved it so much. And no matter what you were doing, if you were taking a break, to show your appreciation for Star Wars, you had to get and skate around in the circles. Like, that was a way to show
Yeah,
respect to Star Wars and to the song. So if you were in the bathroom or you were getting a soda or something, it was like, oh, they're playing it. And everyone would be out there. And it was just it was that way of bowing down. Like, this is so good. This makes me feel so good. And coupled with the skating, which I didn't do tons, but I remember roller skating. But I did around that era go roller skating with friends, and there's something about listening to Star Wars and being on skates like that was just an amazing feeling.
and it's crazy. I know. Maybe sort of 25 years ago, they sort of reissued or remastered the first three releases of the Star Wars
Mhm.
franchise, and put them back on in the cinemas in the UK. And as much as I'd watched them films a million and one times, I just went for that moment when the intro drops and you
Mhm.
get punched in the face with that soundtrack, and that's the moment I went for, and it delivered, and it still delivers.
It's really an incredible piece of music, and also I mean, just the thing of it made me think about fandom. Um, having a cultural thing that you all talked about at school, like and people I remember people going to see it more than once. That seemed crazy to me, but
Yeah,
like yeah, but there was no other way to see it. You're like, I have to go back to see if what I saw was true. It was that good.
yeah.
But yeah, that is a really a lot of fond memories around that record.
Fantastic. Well, look, let's stay in the formative years, Craig. And for the next track, I'm going to ask you to tell me the song that reminds you of your time at school, please.
Well, this one I listened to a lot of music always when I was a kid, but in ninth grade, which was I guess I'd be 14. I was having I was having some rough in junior high, which is a tough time for everyone, puberty, etc. I was having a rough time, and I was probably depressed, and my parents sent me to a new school. I wasn't not popular in my school, and things were socially not great, and I was getting bullied, etc. And I went to this new school. It was called Breck School, and it was the kids were nice. It was a little bit more nerdy. That but immediately I made friends. Immediately people were nice to me, and it was life changing. And I met these friends there, and they were really into REM. And almost immediately, one of them made me a tape of Reckoning, the album. And I remember listening to the first song, pressing play, hearing Harbor Coat, and feeling lucky, like feeling like things were going to be better, and they were. Feeling like I'd found people like, these same group of guys, and I started a band shortly after. Feeling like I'd found my people, and that something about REM or, and other bands we were listening to, they were they were for us, and it wasn't maybe at that point, it wasn't super mainstream, but it was a little left to center, and it was something. It was a path for us. And I'd already started to go to hardcore shows and things like that. But something about there was a sophistication to me about REM and some of the other English music we were listening to, The Cure, etc., that that made me feel hopeful.
Yeah. I think that's so important, and everything that you just said that led you to talk about REM and reckoning, and as you find your tribe and stuff like that. I think in the UK, you know, I think we had the Smiths. The Smiths done that in the UK, and I guess they were both on very similar trajectories at the time, and I think REM are probably my all-time favorite band, and Reckoning. I think I know a lot of people love Murmur, but I think Reckoning they just get the pop melodies right on form there, and I think So Central Rain, Seven Chinese Brothers, Pretty Persuasion, fantastic.
All those are amazing. I mean, that's my favorite REM record, probably
Mm.
because the memories attached. But also, when we, like me and these guys I met started a band, and you could figure out how to play those songs. They weren't that hard. We did Seven Chinese Brothers immediately. We did Radio for Europe. I don't know if we didn't do Pretty Persuasion, but it all felt kind of doable. And then there was also this, um, having been, I don't know, there was a mystique around Athens, Georgia, the South, all that. These are places I hadn't been. And it was all sort of exciting to think about, like what that might be. And it ended up REM on the Document tour ended up being the only time I ever did the whole thing where you sleep out for tickets. You know,
Wow.
we wanted to make sure to have good seats, so we went there overnight and camped out. And it was actually kind of a hard lesson about VIPs because even though we got tickets within like the first minute, we were still in like the 15th row, which I thought we were, vying for the first row. And I realized like, oh, a lot of those tickets aren't really for, the general public, really.
Craig, tell me a little bit about have you got to in Hold Steady or as a solo artist, have you got to play the 40 Watt Club? Have you actually gone and seen if the mystique is still there in Athens, Jay? It's like, have you played it?
I've played it a number of times, and Barry Buck, who owned it, became a friend. I haven't seen her in a while, but yeah, we've had some great nights there. Um, the funny thing is, though, and my opinion on college, sort of these southern college towns, either I'm not sure. To me, you think of these places like Chapel Hill and Athens, and you think about these as these rock and roll utopias because all these great bands come from them. And then you see, and there is that, but there's also a lot of big Southern fraternity energy in these places that like you didn't really picture when you were dreaming about it. And it's like, like just, wild frat boys running down the street and on a American football weekend is not the genteel thing you pictured when we're thinking about being friends with REM.
I can't think about that. I can't think about that, Craig. I'm just picturing Michael Stark having having a cup of coffee with a B-52s. I just want to leave it right there. I don't want to
Yeah,
get touched.
that's what you want. I mean, you can. Yes, it is. It does have a lot of charm to it. So there are parts where you can absolutely see it, but you'll see other things too.
Yeah. Well, look, while we're talking about school and stuff, tell me about, you mentioned that you move schools a lot, and so was school not a particularly, you know, on the whole, an enjoyable experience?
No, actually, so I once I moved, I loved it, and I kind of I went to a private school, which was posher, but also like grades being getting good grades, that kind of thing was cool at my second and that sort of flipped my thing. So I did really enjoy once I got in the right place, I really enjoyed school and I did pretty well. And I went to college in, a traditional way in Boston and did that in 4 years. So I really did like school. It was just the junior high years that were very hard, and I think that's probably the case for a lot of people. But it was also really when I started to look to music for solace, in some ways. And I mean, I that was part of all of it. Discovering music that was not on MTV, etc.
Yeah.
Was made me feel, what was a big thing in my development. But school I liked reading, and I could I was in a place that was gentle enough. Once I was in a place that was kind of gentle enough for me to carve out my place, I enjoyed it a lot.
Did you know what you wanted to be?
I think I always knew I wanted to be around music. I thought, because I was obsessed with music. I don't know. I guess I thought probably when I was younger that I'd work in some sort of like music industry or something like that. Or at as a, maybe a writer or something. But I, and then I started writing songs and I sort of was like, well, this is what I really, really want to do. And, when I went in my 20s, when I got out of school, I went back to Minneapolis and started a band called Lifter Puller. But I worked at American Express Financial Advisors, which is like a big employer in Minneapolis, and was like on the phones. There's 5,000 people who work there, and it was like really, it was a really strange way to spend your day when you're trying to be in a band too at night. But it was also very, it taught me a lot. And you know and I met different kinds of people that you meet than you're through being in a band, etc. So the 20s were really unique, and then I moved to New York at the end of my 20s and started to hold steady.
And going back to, you say you was at university in Boston.
Hmm.
And so did you catch the kind of wave of Boston bands that were exploding at that time?
Yeah, I was there 89 to 93.
Oh,
So
that's the sweet spot, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, um Buffalo Tom
Oh,
was a huge band for us, like me and my schoolmates. Lemonheads, Juliana Hatfield. I remember I would go to shows and like Juliana Hatfield and Evan Dando walking in and thinking like that's like the coolest, it was like the king and the queen just arrived. Um, Pixies not as much because I think that was a little I don't know, they didn't feel like a Boston band at that point to me.
Mm.
Um, um, I'm trying to think what the Bullet LaVolta was. Yeah, there was a lot of great Drop 19s. There was a lot of great music happening. It took me a while to sort of figure out the scene, but uh, the last 2 years I went out a lot and saw a lot of bands.
Yeah, wonderful. I actually saw Evan and Juliana at the Barbican a couple of years ago, and they were still smashing it. It was fantastic seeing them both together.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there were, like it's a shame about Ray. I mean, that record was massive and it was so sweet and so um such a good record, and that there was something happening in Boston at that moment, and I think New York would have been overwhelming to me at that age, but Boston was a good taste.
Yeah. Shame about Ray gets overlooked a lot. I think it is a pretty perfect pop record, that.
Yeah, I mean, To me, that's the one.
Mm,
Um, I actually loved Hate Your Friends.
mm.
But It's a Shame About Ray is a really just a perfect. Each song works great, and the singing on it, his singing is just spectacular.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I'm going to keep you in the formative years for the next track, Craig, and I'm going to ask you to tell me the first record you remember buying from a record store, please.
Okay, so this is the first record I ever bought was Bay City Rollers' Greatest Hits, and they I remain a huge fan of the band. Maybe their biggest fan. At least their biggest American fan, who's a 53-year-old male. But I have insatiable desire for all things Bay City Rollers. But they had a TV show, a cartoon sort of show on, and it was really like uh, they they hadn't really broken the U.S. and so this was a way to try to get it. After really their biggest years. So I think it was like 77. Um, and it was Sid and Marty Krofft. You can see clips on YouTube. It's very strange. It's them interacting with puppets and playing songs. And I just remember being absolutely transfixed by this. Like, I thought they were the coolest looking band. I thought it was just cool. The idea of being in a band. Um, and I said, I need this record. Um, but here's the one question, because we'll see if this scratches the if I'm answering the question correctly, because when I did buy it, I bought it at a Target department store. So I don't know if that's a record store, but I will tell you. The reason I bring that up is because shortly thereafter, I was in a mall with my mother, and I wandered into the record store. It was Music Land, and I think it was the first time I remember ever being I looked through records at department stores before, but this was a record store. And when I went to the Bay City Rollers section, they had like five albums, five different albums because they were already kind of a past their prime.
Mm.
So I couldn't believe that I had so much choices and I went back to my mom and I said, they've got like five Bay City Rollers records here. I need money to get one of them. And I bought Rock and Roll Love Letter, which I think is a US only release. But so those are the two. But Bay City Rollers were, um, my first few records. And I, to me, the music holds up. I think there's a very short line between rollers and punk rock, and sort of the chanting and the beat. It's this sort of glammed out
Yeah.
post Bowie thing. And I joke a lot about it a lot, but at that age, Saturday night, which spells out Saturday, there's a lot of spelling in my life at that age. So to have a song that spells out Saturday was really fun.
Mm.
Um, and they were really cool, and I kept buying the records, and it was kind of interesting because shortly thereafter they had Strangers in the Wind, which is not e- even then there was a sense that this wasn't going up for me. Like even when I was young, I was like, and then they shortened their name to the Rollers and put out this record Elevator, and I was like, this is like maybe it's flailing, right? It's not they sort of disappeared from TV, etc. And um I do remember sort of it being kind of like a sadness in that they were not they're now weren't on TV. These records were kind of stranger. Um but I think that's why I love them still. There's something very mystique.
And the story got sadder, didn't it? I mean, they got absolutely they're penniless, and like they got absolutely fleeced. It's such a sad story. The sort of what happened when the hits dried up for the Bay City Rollers. The money disappeared very quickly, and I don't think people know where that's gone.
There's a great book called When the Screaming Stops about it, and it's just horrific. What I mean, and they had a Svengali manager. They really are, to me, the first boy band. They were the
Yeah.
first band that had a Svengali manager who was taking moving the members around. Um, the level of control he had him was just horrendous.
Mm.
And it's funny because or it's not funny. It's a shame that so many of these stories of boy bands have kind of ended up the same way.
Yeah.
You know,
It's almost like there's a blueprint and it's not a pretty one.
it's not pretty, and now it's like there's some when there's a new one, I'm like, oh God, what are we going to hear about them in 10 years or
Yeah,
years? But the
absolutely.
Rollers, there was also just this. When you read I've read pretty much everything there is, everything I know about, and there was this just desire to shake off the manager, to write their own music, to play on their own records. There's a real conflict there that I'm super interested in because they were the biggest band in the world at one point, but they were all living in a Holiday Inn in Slough. And, the manager would change the rooming lists nightly. So he didn't want them to have a mutiny. So he thought if people became consistent roommates, they might keep talking about something. So,
That's
um,
so fucked up.
horrific level.
God, that is awful. I did not know that.
Yeah, I mean that book is just eye-opening. I mean, the other thing is like the lying about their ages. I mean, they're all made to be younger. And Alan Longmore, who was incidentally my favorite, when at first for whatever reason, he was so old, and they actually pulled him out of the band because he was getting too old, and then put him back sort of unceremoniously back in as a stabilizing force. But when you look at it now, you're like, that's a grown man.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's brutal. Okay, I did not expect you to when I knew that you was choosing a rollers track. I just presumed it was a one-off purchase of Bye Bye Baby or something. I didn't realize you was an obsessive. This is fantastic.
I'm obsessive, and by the way, the record, the Rollers Elevator is one of my weirdly favorite records. It's such a strange record. So when they finally were able to make their own music, and it's not the music you'd expect them to make. It's very new wavy, and of course they have a new singer by that point, but it's some attempt at a mature record that is just to my ears like wild and fascinating. So I
Wonderful.
encourage anyone to check it out.
Okay, I'm going to ask you now, Craig, to tell me the song that soundtracked your years going out to clubs.
So yeah, I thought about this one. I was never a big club guy, like a dance. I didn't go out dancing often, but when I was growing up, I would go to a lot of hardcore shows. In my town in Minneapolis, there's a great club, First Avenue in the 7th Street entry, made famous for many by Purple Rain. It's the club where Prince performs. And it's an old bus station. First Avenue, the main room holds, I think, about roughly 1,500 people. And the entry was, I think, like in the when it was a bus station, that was like a snack bar. And that's a small room that's probably 250 or 300. And so on Sundays, when I was young, they had all ages night on Sundays. And it was called Sunday Night Dance Party, and they would have hardcore shows in the entry in the small room, and then dance in the big room. And kids from all over would come, and it was crowded and hot. And it was 88 or 89? When Stop the Violence Foundation came out, and the song Self Destruction, and it was Boogie Down Productions was
Mm,
behind it, and it was a list of it was like a all-star track, uh, different rappers um, would each do a verse, and then it was the chorus, self-destruction, we're heading for self-destruction, and I just remember that one would it's kind of like the Star Wars story I was telling you earlier. That one would pack the dance floor
yeah.
every time. And I remember sort of this idea that even like because the hardcore like at the hardcore shows would always be really hot. So you'd go into the dance club to cool off or maybe like try to meet the girls or whatever. And that one was like, if they played that, you everyone would have to be out there. Again, showing respect to the song.
Yeah.
Uh, and I more recently, like went and watched the video for this, and it's funny. It's so long. It's like the song is like really long, and it sort of is like this most favorite nations thing is because I think they had to give everyone the exact same number of bars.
Right.
Um, so for all the all stars, they're doing like a lot. It feels like it's just way longer than it needs to be.
Mm.
Um, but it's a really good memory. And it's one of the few as a guy who didn't go to a lot of clubs, it's like one of the few times I can think where I saw sort of the power of that, the dance floor,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah. And we're talking about that sort of time around Gangstar and stuff like that. And Boogie Down Productions were in their pomp then as well. You know what KRS-One was doing then was big.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I don't know. I mean, I'm not any sort of hip hop scholar. I don't. But does it feel like for the size of the band they were then that there have been a little? Have they been? Are they slept on now? I don't know. It doesn't seem like I hear their name come up with as reverently as what I thought they were like the maybe the second biggest band to Public Enemy then.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree with that. But then there's lots of artists, I think, that, artists like Big Daddy Kane don't ever really get brought up in conversations about, influential hip hop anymore. And
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
absolutely. I mean, maybe because it evolves, and it doesn't have, yeah, I don't know why. Maybe it's a singles thing too, maybe, but I definitely feel like it's hard for me to, yeah, Boogie Down Productions just seemed like such a big band when I was
yeah,
that age.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And to go full circle back to REM, obviously KRS-One guested on radio song
Oh,
by
that's right.
REM on Out of Time.
I was on Out of Time, and then that it's interesting. So, but Chuck D was on Cool Thing, right? For it sounds like
Yeah,
what happened first? Cool Thing, probably, right?
yeah, cool thing would have been out for Out of Time. Yeah, definitely.
If that's the sort of the archetype of like, you know what we should do? Um, get a rapper on the break. Yeah,
Yeah,
that cool thing was a really big. I mean, that was mind blowing to me that that sort of solidified Sonic Youth as being the coolest
yeah.
band in the world to me.
Still are, still are.
I mean, that's actually, I'm sorry getting off track, but one of my smartest things I did was when I moved to New York in 2000, I sort of made a pact to myself that if Sonic Youth plays, I'm gonna go. Because you're living in New York now, you got to go see Sonic Youth every time. And I did it pretty much. Every once in a while I'd be out of town, but I saw Sonic Youth a lot when I moved to New York, and now they're no longer. So I feel like really good about that. Was like really good about that because the shows were always amazing.
Yeah. And her new solo record's fantastic as
Oh,
well.
so good, good.
Yeah. Um, well, let's head home after clubbing, Craig, and I'm going to ask you for your next track to tell me a favourite song from an artist from your home county, please.
I have so many great artists from my home county, luckily. So I get to choose my favorite song of all time, which is "I Will Dare" by the Replacements, and they are from Hennepin County, as am I. Hennepin County is Minneapolis and surrounding suburbs. I This was another one of those. When I was talking earlier about school, when I was sort of in the rough part of my life, bullying, etc. I discovered the Replacements, and I knew them. They're a local band. People knew like people I knew said like they're like my older sister knows them, etc. And Hootenanny was the first record I got, and I loved it so much, and they became my favorite band pretty much instantly. And Let It Be by the Replacements is the first record that I remember waiting it to come out. Every other record I like was already out by the time I heard about it. I know this record's coming out. I know what date it's coming out, and I need to get to the record store and get it. And it was autumn of '84, and I got my dad to drive me down there. I couldn't get to the store until the weekend, which was killing me because the records came out on Tuesday then, and I didn't get it till Saturday. Um, but I remember bringing it home and putting the dropping the needle and hearing just the jangle of and I Will Dare is such a romantic song still to me. Meet me any place, anytime, anywhere. If you will dare, I will dare. There's something about bravery of falling in love, or asking someone out, whatever it was. Um, but that song is is still from that moment. It's my favorite song. I don't have to hesitate. And the whole record was so amazing and really spoke to me at a time where I was um, in a rough place, unsatisfied, 16 Blue. Those are beautiful songs that kind of got me through things. But I still think there's absolutely nothing cooler um, than really, I mean, I Will Dare. And then I heard Favorite Thing yesterday, and I was like, I mean, what a great opening to a record, and
Yeah.
still my favorite album, still my favorite song, and it just happens to be that they're from my home county. I don't, we don't say county as much over here, but it does apply. They're from Hennepin County, and so am I.
Fantastic. What a choice. Craig, it's your last song now, and this is where you get to turn the listeners of the show onto something. This is the track that you think many people may not know, but you would like them to hear, please.
Yeah. So a band that really, really changed the way I kind of listen to music, and became obsessive about when I was roughly 20 or 21 was the Grifters from Memphis, Tennessee. And I saw them in Boston when I was in school, and I actually became kind of friendly with them. When I moved back to Minneapolis, they would stay in my apartment when they'd come on tour, and I did a couple trips with them where I got in their van. I was just like, I wanted to see them. I think that it made the thing about the Grifters that was different than other indie rock bands to me is that they kind of went for it in a way that sometimes their shows weren't good. Sometimes they were the best thing I've ever seen. And it was something very exciting about what was going to unfold, because most indie rock bands played roughly the same set every night, and the Grifters had it was improvisational, I guess, but it sort of was just built on a foundation that was a little shakier, and interesting things could happen. Um, and the song I chose is Eureka IV. I never knew if it's called Eureka IV or Eureka 4, like the
Yeah.
but I say IV. And it's the title track of an EP they did. It was a 10-inch record, if I remember right. And it opens up with "Here's the lowdown on the Gold Boy." That's the opening lyric. And I remember just thinking like, "Oh boy." Like that's like sort of a Springsteen thing, when he talks about the magic rat, and you just want to hear more. You want to know more. I want to know about the Gold Boy. And I there's a lot of Bowie in it. And a lot of kind of glam, but also sort of this Memphis kind of big star. Again, I love all things Memphis. So I found it super intriguing and romantic. That I would, if and this is a band that I think has gotten a little lost to history, because they were on Sub Pop, and they were well respected in their day, but I don't think people talk about them enough anymore. And I just think that track Eureka IV is a perfect distillation of all the beauty in the band. And interestingly, as a side note, Dave Schaus from the Grifters was after the Grifters started a band called the Bloodthirsty Lovers, and they had their guitar player was Steve Selvage, who we played a couple shows early on in the Hold Steady, and became friends with Steve, and he then joined the Hold Steady. So there's like a line to be drawn from the Hold Steady to the Grifters. And also, when we last year when we did or when we turned 20, we did a show where we played all of our first album. And when I went back to the first album, Hold Steady almost killed me. It struck me that I think I was trying to do the Grifters here.
Really?
On a couple different songs, there's one called Sketchy Metal, which I was like, oh, I know exactly what I was trying to do. I was trying to do the Grifters. And there's another one called Milk Crate Mosh that's like a kind of a Grifters thing. So yeah, it was a very influential, and it never comes up, but it was absolutely some part of what I was trying to do.
Love that. Love that. Craig, we make it nice and easy for the listeners to go and listen to that track and all the other tracks that we've spoken about today, because we put a little Spotify playlist together so people can go and listen to all of the songs that we've been chatting about. And obviously we'll be putting your music on there as well. And like I say, we spoke about so much great music today. We should continue that and talk about what you're up to. So Craig, tell us everything that's happening.
Everything, a lot is happening. Coming over in a little bit to do some Hold Steady shows. March 6, 7, 8, and 9. At the Dome, at the 100 Club, and at the Electric Ballroom. The I'm really excited about the 100 Club. I've never played there before. I've never been there before.
Fantastic.
It's obviously classic.
It's
And then I
amazing.
have a solo record coming out on April 4th, and it was a great record to me. I'm really excited about this. I made it with Adam Granduciel from The War on Drugs. He was the producer, and a lot of those guys in The War on Drugs play on it. And it's just it's one of my it's I'm really excited about it. I think it's for one, Adam really helped me a lot with the songs, and I think to get to sort of a different place sonically, it was a joy to make. And but also, I think that maybe it's my most narrative record, and in the sense, I think I knew more about the characters than I've ever known going into it. So like it was kind of fun to watch that unfold. And we have one song out already called People of Substance. We'll be putting out a few more, and it comes out April 4th. And then, I'm going out on tour with Bob Mold in April over here in the States. So a lot coming up, but all exciting.
Fantastic. And Craig, if people want to keep up the speed with all of that, where's the best place to find out about everything?
I would say craigfinn.net or Steady Craig and on Instagram.
Fantastic. Well, if it's cool with you, when this episode drops, we'll take you in it. So if people aren't following you already, we'll make it nice and easy for them to do that.
That would be excellent.
Craig, it's been such a delight talking
Oh,
records
yeah.
with you. Thank you
I
so
had a lot of
much.
fun. Yeah, take care. Thanks so much for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. You have a great day, Craig.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.